I'm Tim. I'm with a company called All Digital. We make a product called Brevity. And what our product does is basically help simplify the very complex workflows that we're starting to encounter in digital media. And what's unique about our product is that we make it very quick to upload large broadcast video files to the cloud. And so I'm going to walk through today just kind of some concepts and some things around future-proofing your file-based workflow to the cloud, and just some important concepts and notes that you can kind of take down to think about as you roll out next-generation workflows, some key concepts that they need to incorporate. And I'll be available for questions. We'll have a quick Q&A, and then if you need more advice, we're going to have beers after this, and I'll have a beer with you, and we'll talk about that. If you don't drink beers, we can have sodas too. I know we had some of the BYU folks in the room, so got to keep it on the up and up. All right. So here we go. What I'm kind of excited about when you're thinking about where the future is going to digital workflow is you kind of always want to go where the ball is going to be, not where the ball was. And so the ball was very expensive monolithic systems that were difficult to upgrade and proprietary. And where the ball is going is towards incredible speed of innovation and price points and quality. And so in this slide here, there's a couple pieces of software and hardware that I think are just revolutionary to the content production workflow business. So the first one is, historically, if you wanted to have a cinema-type workflow, you would need to invest in a lot of very expensive rigging for your camera to get a steady picture. And so that one picture on my right, your left, is what's called a gimbal. And historically, gimbals would cost tens of thousands of dollars and be very proprietary and difficult to operate. Now, due to all the drones and other things that use those chips and software, there's a company in Russia that makes an open source software package that you can apply to some very low-cost motors, and you can build your own gimbal now for less than $1,000, and they're very good. And that allows you to get all these kind of cool tracking shots and other things. So there's a cool website out there called nofilmschool.org or .com. I can't remember which one's which, but that'll show you all kinds of cool projects people are making with that type of product. The next piece in the middle there is a Blackmagic design camera. So it used to be if you wanted to do digital workflows and capture digitally, and you wanted to go at the highest level of capture, which is raw footage or uncompressed footage, that would require a very, very expensive rig in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. And then, companies like Red came in and lowered that price point substantially. And then Blackmagic Design came in and created a very, very high quality camera that several of the blockbuster films this summer were actually shot on. And that's a $900 price point. And it uses standard SD cards. And so you can come out of the back of that camera with that SD card. And this is the last product on the slide. It's our little Brevity appliance for workflows. And that card can go right into here. And all of those raw video files or ProRes or DNX files that are coming off your Blackmagic camera can be sent dynamically right into your workflow for things like color grading, editing, production. And it doesn't matter where that camera is. Over the network, this box will talk back to your edit bay and your stand and your storage there and get all those files right off that camera all the way back there in exactly the pristine format that you want. And we put a little secret sauce around that with some proprietary lossless compression, network optimization, some other things I'll discuss, that allow that process to actually work very well even over public internet. And the encryption and everything's there so the files and whatnot are secure. And so you have what historically was a multi-million-dollar kind of investment to create content and workflow that you now can do on that film school credit card. And to me, that's pretty exciting. And so we should all be taking advantage of all these advancements to improve the quality of our content. The next piece that's pretty exciting to me is people are sharing all their knowledge about all of these workflows and best practices. And so one of the best examples I saw is on Flickr. And so Flickr, that camera I just did, this is a picture here that I think would make just an awesome holiday card for us. So get the Napoleon family out in front of that and print it out. But I don't know how to take that picture. I've never really operated a camera very well. So, but on Flickr, I can look up here and see exactly where that picture was taken with the GPS coordinates. I can see exactly what time it was taken. And I can see exactly with what f-stop and focal range and lens and camera was taken. So I could theoretically duplicate that shot relatively easily. And what's really cool about that is for any type of look or feel that you're trying to achieve, there's so many websites now and so many different tools that you can integrate into your workflow that allow your team to come up with really good looks that have been tried and true. And then all that information gets shared back. What's even more important about this picture is that the end user had to do nothing to share all that rich metadata with their file. Directly from that camera, that thing got uploaded with the app, and all of that metadata and picture got shared. And so in any modern day workflow, having the metadata stay intact with the file and the footage is almost as important as the footage itself. And if the metadata doesn't exist, you're never going to find that file. You can't leverage that file. You can't recreate that file. So all that metadata becomes incredibly important. And so why do you want this pristine footage? And why do you want this metadata and everything else? And so in this example, what I'm showing here is a popular color grading application. So again, going back to things that used to cost a lot of money, if you used to talk about broadcast workflows or cinema workflows, one of the things that was a key differentiator between kind of an amateur hour workflow and a really professional one was a concept of color grading or finishing your show. And this is a copy of the DaVinci software from the Blackmagic design guys. And this is now a free piece of software when you buy any of their devices. So again, something that used to cost a lot of money is now very inexpensive. And you can take your piece of footage and turn it from like a 9 to make it into like an 11, right? It's got all of the color grading and things to take and make things look very professional. And why that's important and why you want to go for that very high pristine quality from the start all the way out is because on this graph down here at the bottom, this is the most pristine point at your content. This is when it comes off the sensor. This is its raw footage, it's raw, uncompressed. You've got all the data there. And historically, in the web and the internet, we were delivering the file down here. And so this kind of triangle of data going down is kind of the compression. So we had a lot to work with. We could throw away large parts of data and still get something that was considered acceptable. But what's happened recently with Amazon Fire and a lot of these new devices, 4K, Ultra HD, all of these type of very high quality outputs that the consumers are getting used to looking at, that's moving up. And so now the state of the art of what the consumer wants to see is way up here. So that means a modern day workflow doesn't have a lot of margin for error. So if you indiscriminately compress or accidentally take your 10-bit ProRes file and make it into an H.264 file and then try to color grade it or try to do a little more editing on it, it's not going to look good. It's going to be the wrong file. You've lost kind of your chain of command. You've lost from your input to your output. And so the operational science around taking those files in, keeping them at that highest quality, and then compressing them as the final step for those different levels of output that you're going to need for your different parts of the audience becomes one of the key measurements, key gauges of your modern day workflow. The other thing that's a little scary about this is that very much like in the enterprise, where employees' computers at home and their phones and their smartphones at home got better than the equipment they were given at work, and people started going, wow, this PC I have at work is really slow compared to the one I have at home. It's kind of getting like that between the broadcast world and the consumers when services like Amazon and such are starting to release 4K content, Ultra HD content, before the broadcasters are even ready for it. So a lot of the content owners and things don't even have 4K or higher definition content figured out on how to deliver that as a service, and the consumers are already got the devices to play it back. Historically, it's been a long rollout from somebody like a DirecTV or a Comcast before consumers could benefit from all this great content. Today, it's ready before we are. And so looking at that in a very simplified version, you've got lots of SD cards that are capturing lots of camera footage off those cameras, going through very advanced production workflows that are often at many different locations. So the other big trend we've also seen in the space is that many of the post-production facilities, many of the teams and creative teams don't all live in the same building or near the same building. They're working together. So we just recently worked on a project where most of the graphics and 3D animation team was in Poland, and the editor was in New Jersey, and the audio mix guy was in Oregon, and so on and so forth. And so it's a lot of fun because I think you get, more flavors, makes the pasta sauce better, as we say in Italy. It's good stuff. So you got all of this distributed workflow, but if you're trying to move around 10-bit higher ProRes type files, ProRes HQ files to keep that highest pristine file, you start running into some technical hurdles to clear. A simple 1 minute of ProRes type HQ files can be, several gigs in size. So you're dealing with very, very large files that you need to be efficient and be able to distribute it to your workforce. That could be in many different locations. And then, obviously, the new devices just keep coming. So in your outputs and derivatives of all your source that you're going to go to distribution, you no longer have one size fits all there. There's several different variations. There's, as we've seen at the show today, there's all kinds of dash and HLS and MPEG-5 and different color factors. And so getting ready to master lots of different file outputs is another thing that you need to contemplate. And so let me try a quick little demo here of showing what a workflow might look like. And so in this example here, I kind of condensed it for time a little bit. But what I'll show here is taking a file in off of a SD card, sending it to a color grading station, go in, color grade that, and then send it back into a distribution queue. And then that distribution queue is going to encode it to the adaptive bit rates and play it back in a JW player. So the workflow there is ingest from like a red camera, go to color grading, quick color grade, send it back into the cloud, cloud renders, sends it to JW player, and do that all like in a couple minutes, not a day or two. And so let me start this video here. So I pick a project called color grading, which is going to send my file. That file now arrives on my desktop, in my edit bay there, so I can pick that file. I'm going to open that up in Adobe Premiere. Before I start my edit, I notice the color is pretty off on that file. So I'm going to use Adobe's product called SpeedGrade to go ahead and color that up. As you can see, that's pretty blown out. So this is all part of the Creative Suite. It's pretty awesome, very cost-effective product. So pick a look there. You could probably do better in the audience. I know you guys are wizards at this stuff, but I got my color grade. Now I'm going to send that file for distribution. So I go ahead and open up my app, hit send, and as you can see there in the cloud, all the various renditions are now created, and it's in my distribution queue. So I know that was a little quick, and we can show you that in a little bit more slow down breakdown at the booth over there if you want to get into details of all of that worked. But you can see there that users aren't having to select which version of ProRes they want to create as their output, what type do I need for this type of workflow. They just pick a very standard kind of name, grading workflow, distribution workflow, whatever that is, and their files arrive in their workspace ready to go in the right format and context. So it makes it a very smooth, seamless workflow to go from A to B. And so you got to think of every part of your workflow from going from this step to that step. There might have been a QC step that you want to have in that workflow. Instead of just sending to your own player, you may want to be sending to YouTube or Amazon or Azure or one of your favorite cloud providers. You may want to send it over files to your CDN net storage for streaming. There may be a lot more complicated steps in your workflow, but those can all be scripted with the brevity tool over here and then set up with a common name, and your files can just go from point A to point B to point C in a common standard way. Not having to worry about one of those people along the way accidentally going, oh, I'm going to change the pixel aspect ratio. I'm going to do something that's really going to torque this video and make it unusable for everybody downstream from me. So by having that all scripted and kind of taking that control out of the user's hands, you then have a file workflow that is automated and kind of been proven and tested and QC'd. And so if I'm going to look at that from more of a technical or kind of a what are the boxes of functionality, when we're talking about encoding or compressing or workflow, you're really talking about several factors. So the first that you want to understand is where all your sources are coming from. So are you shooting on Red cameras? Are you shooting on Blackmagic Design cameras? Are you shooting on watches? Or are you shooting on GoPros? Where is all that source material going to come into? And then what are you going to use as your standardization to get all that source material into something that's a common format for your production team? Then what resolutions are you going to be dealing with? So are you going to be doing 1080p? A lot of broadcasters are still just doing 720p in a lot of their workflows. Some broadcasters are moving up to 4K. There's even some workflows that are higher than that. So where in the spectrum are you going to be in terms of resolutions? Frame rates is getting incredibly complicated. If you're in the sports field, a lot of people are moving to 60 frames per second. A lot of the devices like Apple TV now support 60 frames per second. And if you've seen sports in 60 frames per second, it looks pretty awesome. And so that's something that adds a lot of complexity to the workflow. How do you deal with that? How do you deal with that on devices that don't support 60 frames per second? What do you do? How do you change your workflow around that? So quite a bit of you can see here, you start adding all these variants together, and it's that in button on your calculator. These are the number of things that you have to kind of contemplate, times that, times that, times that, and it adds into a lot of complexity. The next one is compression scheme. Again, what I talked to about at the beginning is, what's your organization willing to give up in quality and cost? So if you want to talk about completely uncompressed and never have compression at all, you're talking about making your storage vendor very, very happy. If you're talking about, hey, a little bit of compression's okay, or you might say, you know what, we're in the news or we're in a perishable content business, speed's where it's all at. We want to have a lot of compression on our content. We're okay with that. Speed's more important, and this is the constraints we're under as a business. We're going to add a little compression, but let's decide that up front. And so that's kind of what I call your compression scheme. And then you'll probably have different answers for that question, depending on if it's your distribution file formats versus your production ingest file formats. Then there's the file containers. And this is really going to be determined a lot based upon, on your distribution side of the house, what devices are you going to? They're going to have preferences for file containers. Things like H.264 are extremely popular in the device and distribution, but you never want to use H.264 as your production workflow. You want to use something that's designed for that, something like a ProRes type file format, something like a DNX type file format if you're an Avid shop. And so those file formats are designed, you also hear like MXF mentioned quite a bit. And then there's all these complex conversions from those production file formats into those distribution file formats. And so again, you got to contemplate all of that and have a strategy for that. Then the next piece, we mentioned a little earlier before, but closed caption, ad tracks, data, all of that, that's what I kind of put in the metadata category. And so as you pull files through all of that, you're not just managing all of the video bits, you're managing all of the other stuff that goes along with it. And as you go from one file format to another, they don't deal with metadata the same way. And so you have to have a workflow system that understands that when I go from this file format to that file format, just don't throw all my metadata away. I need to be able to save that and keep that going. Then you get down to locations and network. So if you've got 13 offices around the world where you're running edit bays around the clock and such, you want to have your production staff be able to walk in and have all the files ready for them. You don't want to be paying very expensive people to sit there and wait for things to download or things to show up on their drives. And so being able to manage location of where the media is and where it's going to be is very, very important. You'll see a lot of the agency workflows today will start out in London. They'll shift over to teams working on the production in New York. By the end of the day, it'll be out in LA. And then by night, it'll be in Singapore and things going through QC and finish. And then it'll be back in London and showing the client in the morning. And so you have to be able to have a workflow that can get all of that content from point A to point B to point C and so on. And so when you think about that, then there's some other options that you have to also kind of put on top of that. On the basics is, how do you deal with security? If you have, are you going to allow people to work off of the VPN? Are they all going to be behind the VPN? Are you okay with AES encryption over public internet. These are all kind of the security requirements. If you're working on a feature movie, they're going to be dictated to you. If you're working as an independent, you probably have a little bit more leeway there. Turnaround times, this is becoming crucial and important. As you see with a lot of studies in social media, the first news story that gets published on a certain topic gets a lot of the shares. Those shares equate to more ad revenue. And so it used to be that, hey, maybe your OVP had a 30-minute turnaround time between when you uploaded a clip and where it transcoded and where it played. That would be kind of archaic by today's standards. You'd want a workflow where within minutes of an event happening, you have the ability to have that video published and syndicated, not only to your own website, but to the sites such as Facebook and others that are now a feeder for a lot of your traffic and a lot of the monetization. In the news business especially, the model has shifted from, hey, we're just going to bang it out every night on the nightly news, and that's going to be our source of revenue, to certain clips, certain big stories, certain things that go viral, generate a disproportionate amount of money. So there's use cases and things of certain stories that generate more money in one clip than all the other stories combined for that month. And so that kind of viral syndication starts with a very, very aggressive workflow to be first to market with a story. And I can see some traditional journalist people kind of cringing at that kind of commentary, but it's some of the hard facts that we see. And then, velocity, volume of assets. Are you doing one show a month? And what we see is we have some clients doing as many as 35,000 different assets in any given month. So there's different levels going from just one or two shows to high volumes of video. And then you add in things like police body cameras and other types of application for video. The number of assets being dealt with and managed becomes pretty staggering pretty quickly. Then collaboration and status. Obviously, everybody wants to know exactly in real time across all of this complexity, where are all their assets? Where did everything arrive? What's the status? Gimme, 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 let me know where it's at. So being able to have self-service dashboards and things so people know where all their media is at any given time helps the operations team not get bogged down with just constant phone calls and emails. Looking at the operational team emails at some of the studios and things, it's almost funny at this point. It just kind of moves. It's like that screen on the Matrix, right? They can't even really keep track of where everything's going. So they're all starting to invest in systems that get it off of email into a more professional dashboard. And then ultimately that leads to your deliveries. And those deliveries often lead to deliveries that are specified for various partners. So not only are you delivering all that media file to just a broadcast signal, you're delivering all that media to all your different syndication partners, whether that's a Yahoo, or that's a Google, or that's a Facebook, or that's an iTunes, or that's a Netflix. And so the modern world of distribution isn't just put it up on the satellite. It's you got to put it out to potentially hundreds, if not thousands of locations. And so cube all that complexity, it kind of gets you pretty excited to get a different line of work. No, I'm kidding. It's definitely not the easy button. So anybody that says this stuff is commodity or easy or it's not hard, it can be very complex, and you've got to manage it very closely. So with this one, I want to just go in a little bit more detail. I know we have some of you are very technical and want a little bit more kind of down what's inside the baseball. So specifically for brevity, one of the areas that we talk about, and I'm going to break down these into three areas. I'm going to talk about kind of the network optimization, the compression, and then the transcoding, to just give you kind of some things that we found as best practices to help move files. So the first thing is we didn't use TCP/IP as our way to move large video files. We opted for protocols that were better, such as UDP. And the secret sauce of UDP is how you manage the network congestion and how you manage packet resends, kind of not over-sending too much data. So knowing on your send and receive what's the right flow of data and keeping that managed very tightly. And so we made sure that we thought about things like the encryption, what level of security at each frame of video. Do you want to encrypt that, or do you want to encrypt the chunk of packet that's going to the network? All that kind of, and have lots of options around security so that those files go over that security. Then one of the big things that you have to do, especially like you're delivering to a Netflix or iTunes, you need to have the ability to give them a checksum So validation of everything I sent you is exactly what I decided to send you, and it got there exactly the way I wanted it to get sent. And so at what level do you do checksum? So if you do checksum at the whole file level and there's a problem and you have to send the whole file again, that's kind of a hassle. Can you do checksum at a more granular level so that you can catch just little pieces that may have had an issue and resend just those and get back to your integrity of file? Then obviously managing for packet loss and network latency. And so there's different ways to address that. There might be issues where you're never going to have enough connectivity, or you're not going to have a good enough connectivity to send that whole file. So maybe you go to a model where you're dealing with proxy files and sending proxy files to those people in bad network locations, and then saving the high quality files for later renders and things. And then being able to synchronize file systems. So synchronizing 1 or 2 video files, pretty easy. All of a sudden you have directories with millions of files and very complex structures. Does that file synchronization strategy still maintain and keep up? And so these are good things to kind of check and walk through when you're selecting a vendor that's going to kind of come in and help you, optimize your network for sending lots of video content from point A to point B. Compression. I think there's a lot of confusion around the term compression. There's a show on, anybody watch HBO? They have a whole show on it now, Silicon Valley. They talk about compression all the time. They show wowza server configurations and stuff. It's pretty funny. The first is none. And none's kind of the, what they call raw. And so that means the data that comes off the sensor, you stayed just that good throughout the whole file. The lossless means that if you took a frame of that video on the end that you sent it and you received it, they're identical. You can't really tell that they're identically the same data. There was just data compression. So things like gzip and other things that keep the 2 frames identical, but there still was a level of compression that was applied. That would be called lossless. Visually lossless, what that means is things like Photo JPEG 2000 at the frame level. There's technically a little bit of mathematical difference between this frame and that frame, but it's not visually perceptible. So some people are willing to make that trade-off so that they can save a lot of economics and speed by having a much smaller file size. And then the last, and this is often associated with our distribution codecs like MPEG-4, H.264, it's called a lossless codec. Pretty much anybody, you put 2 frames, one that's the original and one that's the H.264 frame, and you go, oh, that has something different about it. There's compression, artifacts, things like that. That's what's called a lossy codec. And so understanding that in the production flow, you probably want to be in those top 3 is a good rule of thumb, And then in distribution, obviously, you're going to get and touch that lossy box. But you don't want to be in the lossy box necessarily in your production flow unless you have some type of application that requires speed. And so just to kind of a little cheat sheet, and we don't have to go into all of this. This is a whole topic in itself. But if you're going to deal with ultra HD, 4K, that kind of thing, you're going to be dealing with files that are in that raw 10-bit or higher. So you can even go 12-bit, 16-bit. There's theoretically even 16-bit capture systems and stuff there that are at the kind of the science university level right now that do raw DNX, ProRAM, DVCAM. And then you want to make sure you're capturing all of the camera data and other types of data along with that file format. Then you're going to be doing production and editing. So usually in those, you're using file formats like ProRes in a QuickTime movie container, or you're using like MXF. And then when you distribute files, that's where you talk about like 8-bit, and that's usually like a typical iPhone H.264 file would be an 8-bit type file. And so at any point in your production or editing, if you're all of a sudden got an 8-bit file introduced into your workflow, you're potentially losing a lot of quality, and you're potentially going to have files that look inferior to the consumers are getting trained on kind of these higher end workflows. So I'm not going to read through those, but as you can see, those are just some best practices. Again, I think important to write down and understand and have some rules, and then script those rules with a tool like Brevity or others that agree to, this is how we capture our content, this is how we put it through our workflow, this is how it goes out. Just leaving that ad hoc up to whatever editors want to do or whatever production people want to do is going to end up in kind of chaos. As you can see with all this complexity, if you don't put a very good operational plan around bringing your content in, working with it, and sending it out, you're going to end up with too many combinations to deal with. And what happens is then all the rest of the ecosystem that deals with your content is going to have all this rework, and it just becomes a big mess for everybody. So if everybody does it right the first time, it makes all of our jobs much easier. And then, maintaining a process across all those, I think that's pretty self-explanatory. So in quick summary, then we'll have time for a quick Q&A. I think the tools, it's kind of a great time to be a content creator, right? The tools are there to make beautiful looking content, and it's super affordable to do great work. And we all should be doing great work. Anybody that's not producing awesome videos right now, shame on you. Let's get, thinking about compression as a key part of the workflow. We want to avoid being in that kind of screwed up box. If people are looking at your stuff like, gosh, they didn't do it right. You never want that to be you. I always say that time and money doesn't really matter anymore because it's got so affordable, there's no excuse not to do it right. Even though it might be a little bit of angst, the billions of dollars that you see guys like Netflix and stuff spending on their workflows, you can create the same stuff no matter if you're just, a one-man band doing a little independent movie. You can still have a great workflow. And some of the best content, I always look at the Metallica album that was produced on the Sunset Boulevard when they're all sleeping in one apartment together, right? That's still great work, right? And so great work is great work. And so you don't need to have tons of money to create a great workflow. You can do it with off-the-shelf components, open source, other things, if you just follow a very good plan and a very good structure. And then the last point is, there's not a lot of time to figure this out. You need to move to these kind of higher end workflows now because consumers are already getting used to it and trained about it, and they're already going to all, this Christmas, open up their new 4K TVs and devices and expect content for it. So you're going to get the phone calls to your operational teams and content teams like, hey, how come we're not doing 4K? Everybody else is. And so there's no time to kind of wait. We don't have like 3 or 4 years to kind of get ready for this. It's pretty much here now. And we're going to need to move kind of quickly to get all of this great looking content out there, the highest possible formats. So with that, I have time for maybe 1 or 2 quick questions. And I know we have a microphone running around if somebody wants to get it started. Awesome.
Useful in 10 years.
So the question is, what are the, what's the best archive format? And my answer there is, I think, 2 things. I think one is things like Glacier storage from Amazon, and Google has offered some archival storage solutions that make storing offsite in the cloud with people that have very good data retention policies allow you to store a lot more files economically. So I would say that you'd always want to store in the highest quality file format that you have. So in the case of today, that would probably be something like a ProRes HQ or an MXF file with like RAW as a codec. And then obviously have a strategy to have some type of player or software that 20 years from now when people discover that archive, there's some instructions on how to play it back. I talked to the guys at NASA once, and they were telling me the story about how they lost the footage from the moon landing. So everything we see about the moon landing is actually a rebroadcast that was down in Australia. And so the guy who has the only player that can play back the footage once they find it someday in the NASA warehouse says, you're going to need this player to play back that moon landing footage when you find it. So he put a note on it when he retired and put it into a box. So I suspect they'll find the archive footage at some point, then they were not going to be know where the player is. So you got to have kind of a strategy there, both to store the media and then also store the player, and of how that's going to be played back. And so, please don't store your archive footage in some really highly compressed format that looks terrible, because then that degrades the value and the quality of the content. Great. With that, I think we'll bring up our team from BYU. Thank you very much. We'll be around to answer questions. We're in the all-digital booth.
Good afternoon. My name is Ryan Holmes. I'm the Digital Media Director at BYU TV. And thanks for being here. I'm going to tell you, this presentation might sound a little bit like a story, because 6 years ago, I had just sold a video game development company named Chair Entertainment to Epic Games. And I was kind of looking for the next project to work on, and I got sucked into this thing at BYU TV. I was a consultant for a little bit at first, and it's been an interesting journey, because BYU TV was just beginning a transformation. 5 years ago, their tagline was "Keeping You Connected," or our tagline, and what it really implied was if you weren't an alumni or a member of the LDS Church, you didn't get BYU TV. You wouldn't even understand what's going on that channel. And the content was mostly created on campus, and we decided to move in a different direction and become much more mainstream. And the tagline changed to "See the Good in the World," and our unique value proposition is that we're going to create family-friendly, trustworthy, intelligent, positive, upbeat content. And we're creating content, spending actually millions of dollars. This is from a university-run television studio. And here's an idea. 5 years ago, we had no content that was worth watching, and now we have some content. Whoop. I'm going to plug in the audio. Sorry about that. So BYU TV is like a startup company. We do everything that the big networks do, just at a smaller scale. And I've been here now, like I said, for a little over 5 years, and I've been here through this transformation. And today we sit at between 60 and 65 million US households in our cable and satellite distribution. We broadcast in English. We also broadcast to Latin America in Spanish and Portuguese. We have a digital video platform that I'm responsible for with about 500,000 monthly active users. And we also have radio properties, BYU Radio being chief among them. It's a Sirius XM channel. People hear this and they go, wow, that's interesting. That's a lot for something that's being run mostly by students at Brigham Young University. So BYU TV actually is a pioneer in the field of digital video streaming. There was a company in Utah called Move Networks that was really a pioneer in the whole adaptive bitrate streaming, and BYU TV was the first broadcaster to ever use a Move Networks player. So we started off with Windows Media Streams and then Move Networks, and when I came on in 2010, we launched a new website that had live, 24/7 live television, all of our DVR events. BYU Broadcasting does about 150 live events a year. and then all of our on-demand library. And this was the state of the art in 5 years ago. Today, we're sitting on a lot of platforms, and we've kind of moved from BYU TV 1.0 to we've moved through to 2.0, and now we're architecting BYU TV 3.0, preparing ourselves for the future. And in 2011, I had just launched an iOS app and a Roku app. And I was very frustrated by what I would call the measurement challenge. I had Ooyala as my OVP. So I had some analytics tied to the Ooyala platform. So wherever I was using an Ooyala player, I had some video analytics. I had Google Analytics going for the website. I had some analytics available to me maybe through Akamai, which was the CDN. But the data was all over the place. And by the way, I wasn't using on iOS, I was using a native player, and I had no analytics. I had Flurry analytics for app analytics. And on Roku, I had nothing. And this was frustrating. And maybe some of you have been in this situation. The fragmentation of analytics isn't as big a problem today because you see a lot of OVPs sort of unbundling their analytics products from their players. So that helps solve the problem a little bit, but you can still find yourself in this situation today quite easily, where you've got data all over the place. And I don't have the time or the resources to deal with pulling in all this data from multiple sources. I want it all going in right out of the gates. So I also had this challenge of working at a university where I've got a small team of developers. I've got 4 full-time developers on my team and a gaggle of students. And huge ambition. Yeah, huge ambition to extend the platforms. I mean, when you look at the platforms that we're actually on, you'll see that we compare favorably with anyone in the industry. And the reason we're able to do this is because of our software architecture. So this presentation is about analytics, but it's really about software architecture first, and then analytics. So let's talk about a technology stack. This is our technology stack. This is what we've been working on for the last 5 years. You start with the origin layer. This is kind of some of what Tim was talking about, your corporate workflows and where does your original data reside, and you may have origins on the corporate level and in the cloud, at your CDN. So I'm going to go through this pretty quickly. If any of you have questions about anything, just raise your hand and we can take questions as we go. Then you've maybe got a CMS layer, and this CMS layer, it could be your MAM, it could be custom-built CMSs, stuff that's in the cloud. But this is how you're managing your content and all of its metadata and making it available to your applications. And the layer that we spend a lot of time on is our broadcast service layer. It's a web service layer. It's a service-oriented architecture. And so this is really our secret sauce, if there is any. We spent a lot of time building APIs on top of our CMSs and origins and up the technology stack as well. So just to give you a little example of what I'm talking about, maybe there's an API that we have called Get Featured Episodes. And you call this API and it returns a response. And that response is consumed by all of our apps, whether that's a website. You can see here on the left that little widget there called Featured Episodes. So there's an American Ride, a Studio C episode there, and whether that's like our website or our Android app or maybe our iOS app or the Xbox 360 app, they all consume the same API, and so we manage everything universally. And so you end up, again, with this integrated technology stack, and all of the clients are built on top of that. Won't talk too much about the CDN, but we use the same processes and CDNs that the bigger players do. We've implemented dynamic site acceleration and caching of our sites and all of our web services. We've got recovery, disaster recovery. We fail over to remote sites. If you were to blow up our building in Provo, there's another one just like it in Idaho. So good luck with that. Cloud services is another layer that I would talk about. Certainly the OVP sits at that layer, Adobe, maybe Facebook, Twitter, your different social integrations. And finally, you have the client. And we've been able to work with third parties to help us build our clients. Some of the clients we build in-house with my team and our team of students. Others we'll outsource. But when you can go to a third party with a very clear API and a design, it's very easy and quite inexpensive. You may not believe this, but our first Roku app I built for $1,000 because I already had the API. I found a programmer who had a template, and in about a week and a half, I had a Roku app, and today Roku is our biggest platform. Now, of course, we're spending more money than that now developing that out, but we were able to extend to that platform very quickly and very cheaply. So we focus at this level, really the platform side of things. And some people, I guess, can afford to work in silos, and maybe you've got legacy platforms that you have to deal with, and so that makes sense. But I don't think this is a smart way to do it. I like an integrated technology stack. So let's talk now about data and how this fits into the whole technology stack. Like I said, BYU TV is investing millions. We have a show called Granite Flats. It's a scripted drama, and we spent over $1 million an episode on this, which is a lot for us. It's not House of Cards, but it's a lot for BYU TV. And 3 seasons, $35 million. And we got to know how the audience is responding to that and on what platforms. So understanding the audience is critical to us. It also provides insight into how we're going to develop out our platform. Of course, marketing decisions and monetization. I can't talk too much about, you all know more about monetization than we do at BYU TV. It's a very interesting model. BYU TV is kind of a hybrid. We're on traditional satellite and cable distribution, but we don't charge a sub rate. So our content is free, and the way we monetize the content is through more like a PBS model, underwriting, and our viewers donate, and they donate millions and millions of dollars. And our ownership also kicks in. So what matters to us is really distribution, getting the content out there. Monetization might become more important down the road, but building the audience, it's like any startup. You're trying to build your audience and build your subscriber base, if you will, and then you can worry about monetization maybe later. So when we started looking at an analytics platform, we had goals. I needed the analytics platform to be player agnostic. Can't be dependent upon a particular player, because there wasn't a player that I could find that existed on all the platforms. Again, this is 2011, so 4 years ago. I wanted a single data repository. I don't want it fragmented all over the place. And I also wanted all of my analytics data together. That means my website and the app-centric data and the video data all to be integrated, because the data is there to answer real questions. Like a simple question like, how many people watched the BYU-Texas football game yesterday? That's the kind of question I would get asked, and the answer was not an easy one to answer, to find. there's more to it. Are you talking about live or on demand or in the DVR, or are you on which platform? And I wanted a very easy way to find answers to that. I needed this analytics solution also to be very extensible to new platforms, because I knew that web, iOS, and Roku were not the end. That was just the beginning. We were quickly launching Android, Xbox 360, Xbox One, Chromecast, Fire TV, Windows tablets and phones, and the list goes on and on. And how do you extend? So had to be extensible. And the tool set that we chose was Adobe Video Analytics. And back then, it was called just Milestone Analytics, Video Analytics. And it's evolved some over the last several years. But it gave us this fundamental tool set. It wasn't dependent upon a player. You could use what they call their data insertion API. It was just HTTP posts and gets and some JavaScript. And you could pretty much get this analytics package onto any platform. And so that's what we did. We got all of our apps and all of our websites onto Adobe Analytics, and now our web, our mobile, and our over-the-top analytics are all integrated. Once they get into Adobe, it doesn't matter how they got there. Sometimes it's a player integration, sometimes it's just an app or a website integration. And for us, the taxonomy that we think of when we think of data is probably like some of you. It's shows and episodes and seasons, and that's how we want our data organized. I want to know how many views of a certain episode of Studio C, which is our sketch comedy program, did we get. And I also want to know how the video is performing and the audience is growing by platform and also by video type. We have a 24/7 live stream, and that's a very different kind of analytics problem, because to a player, that looks like a single piece of content. And the content is changing every 30 minutes or every hour or 2 hours, as the case may be. So it's a little bit different integration problem. And we also want rich metadata. All that metadata associated with the show, we want that in our analytics platform. So those were the requirements, and those were the solutions. So here's maybe a general approach. Sort of decide first on a organizational philosophy. What questions are you trying to answer? What metrics are important to your organization? And if you're going to get into analytics, then you're going to become familiar with these concepts of events, properties, and variables. These three concepts really are important to understanding analytics. You also need to understand the limitations and the capabilities of each platform that you're going to be developing on. Is there an SDK available? Is this going to be a custom integration? Like I said, when we started with Adobe, there were no SDKs. It was all this generic HTTP, data insertion API. Now they have SDKs for almost every platform, and that greatly simplifies the solution. So you start off with maybe some kind of a requirements document. This can be written by anyone. You don't have to be a really smart person to write this. You just have to be able to say, what are the questions that you want answers to? What should this thing track? And from there, you will get into, like I mentioned before, events, properties, and variables. Now, I'm going to apologize in advance for the next few slides, because they may be the worst slides ever in terms of visibility, but maybe they will portray a point. Events, of course, are time-based or event-based tracking of certain conditions. It's usually something that the user initiates, like a video view. Properties are traffic variables. They relate to page hits, views, sessions, etc. And then VARs, variables, or EVARs as they're called in the Adobe world, are conversion variables. They relate to desired user behaviors. So you end up with someone's going to create something like this, a list of events. And maybe you're looking at this event up here called a video play. And that video play will correspond to certain other variables, and those variables will be fired off at every time a video play tracking pixel is sent, and also with properties that are set. And there is a relationship. You could draw a much more complex map between all of the events, all of the variables, all of the properties. Another thing is you have to pay attention to the differences between your different types of video. Live and DVR and VOD have different property values, but they can be tracked exactly the same way. So this slide just kind of illustrates the different parameters and what how those values might change for the different types of video. The other thing that we did that maybe is a little unconventional is we created a map between our websites and all of our apps. They're not all exactly the same. They're not created from the same design template, but they have common features. So your home page on our video homepage might be analogous to our featured view on our iOS or Android or mobile app, and it is analogous to the main page or the main view on our Roku app. And we created a common or a universal page GUID so that we could count page views across all of our applications and all of our websites. Does that make sense? It's just kind of a way of translating between the app world, the OTT world, and the web world, and seeing if there's patterns of user behavior and pathing that are common. And we hopefully end up with an optimized design by studying that. The other thing I mentioned earlier, there's two types in the Adobe world, two types of ways to track video. There's the milestone analytics. And the way milestone works is you have this big bundle of data, all the variables and properties, and when a video starts, you send it to the Adobe tracking server, and then you decide. It could be every 30 seconds, it could be every minute, it could be every 5 minutes. You decide what the granularity of that update to the tracking server is. And that's kind of a tough thing for us, because the more granular you get, the better your data is, but also the more money it costs. So we found ourselves kind of struggling with, I want better, more granular data, and ended up choosing some value like 5 minutes. Our user watch times are long. We usually engage our users for 42 minutes on average with our content. So 5 minutes was okay. We could lose up to 5 minutes of watch time. And when the video ends, of course, you get the last tracking call. In the heartbeats world, it's a little different. You have a big update to the tracking server when the video starts. And then all of the other subsequent intermittent updates are sent to a proxy server with heartbeats. And they're much smaller. They just have a little bit of a unique ID about that video and that session, and they go to the proxy server every 10 seconds. And that proxy server is listening for those heartbeats. And if the heart stops beating, it says, oh, the video must be over. Or the app can send, the video's over. And the video's ended now, and all those heartbeat data are now aggregated and summed up and sent to the tracking server at the end. So that's how Heartbeat works, and it's a pretty slick, more efficient way of tracking data. And I would say that 80% of our apps are using Heartbeats now. We still have a few that are using milestone analytics. When it's all said and done, you end up with some form of analytics at every layer of your application. And this could be true of almost any element. Your video exists at every layer, really. Your ad server integration exists at every layer. But the cool thing is, it's modular. If I needed to switch to a different analytics program, I could do that pretty easily. Just, in fact, a couple of weeks ago, I had to switch ad platforms. And because of the software architecture, I've been able to completely migrate from one ad platform, LiveRail, to another ad platform in about 2 weeks for all of our applications because we have this software architecture. I wanted to show you what this looks like. So I'm going to just kind of pop out of this and come over here. Let's see. I might have to go into mirroring mode real quick. Okay. So here I am in my analytics dashboard, and I create dashboards for our end users. And these dashboards are completely customizable. Whatever data I want, I can organize. And so you'll see that I've created a little called reportlet called top shows, and it shows what our top shows are for the given time period. I can come over here and I can switch from the last few days and come over here and click a preset and pick any predefined or any custom date range. I can, if you'll come down here, you'll see that I've got all kinds of reportlets broken down, my top shows by platform. This is kind of interesting. So you'll see some report suite summaries here. If I want, I can drill down into, any of these. And get more detail and start messing with which metrics I want. I can save it as a, if I want to add this to a different dashboard. It's very intuitive and user-friendly, and so our marketing department, our programming department, all can jump in here, and we basically build dashboards for them and let them have at the data. I know I'm about out of time, so I'm going to jump back over here. Say thanks for your time today, and maybe we have time for just a couple of questions. Right over here.
So, a great job putting this together with students and stuff. Awesome. You have 60 million subscribers today. And from two questions I have: what do you do, if any, for user authentication, or is it just?
Good question. So. Okay, the first question was what do we do for authentication? So, like I said, BYU TV is not like any other cable channel in the world, really, because we give away our content to our users. You come to byutv.org and create a user account, and you can have access to all of our content. It's free. So we don't need to authenticate that way. There could become a day in the future that we would, and I'd probably be using a product like Adobe Primetime or something to do that authentication if that were the case. Second part of your question?
Right, so with 60 million subs and the analytics that you're capturing today, what, if any, do you do in real time to be able to turn that around and work on quality of service? How do you know that each of those end users across all those devices are getting their content in the best possible user experience? Are you doing anything in that sense?
An interesting question. So we actually built some custom variables into our analytics package that do track some quality of service. So we'll track any kind of buffering that happens, stalling of the video. We track which bit rates are being delivered, just kind of the basic QoS stuff. We also get some QoS stuff built into our Akamai CDN. But again, because you're giving away the content, that quality of service is secondary, actually. if they were paying for it, then you'd probably have a stronger incentive, and we'd probably build in a platform like Conviva or something. What's that?
You're collecting upfront, so somebody is paying for it.
Yeah, we can talk more about that. The subscribers are not paying for it. Okay, back in the back.
When you first got this package, how long did it take to set up? Did you do it with your team, or was there like a team from Adobe that worked with you for setup?
Good question. We actually paid for some consulting hours at Adobe, and they actually outsourced that consulting to a third-party Adobe partner. And so, yeah, we had someone to kind of hold our hands and walk us through that the first time. And once we got set up and we understood exactly how it was working, as we've added new platforms, we've done all of that integration work ourselves. So I probably spent $5,000 in professional services with Adobe, is all. Oh, timing. Probably took us only a month or so to get it set up on the 3 platforms that we launched in, which were iOS, Roku, and web. Yep. Anyone else? Right here.
About how much do you spend on Roku development per year?
That's not an analytics question. It's hard to answer that question because, again, we're working on the platform side continuously, my whole team. But I'll just say this, it's probably on the order of tens of thousands, not hundreds of thousands or millions. And again, I just come back to the software architecture is what allows us to do that. We're constantly building out our platform, and as we add new features, you know, whether it's notifications or user-generated playlists or whatever, the next app that's got its turn in the development pipeline gets those new features, and then we go back and sort of backfill with every version update for every platform that we're on. So I don't have the luxury of like upgrading the whole platform at once. You know, all 8 or 10 apps get an upgrade at once. We do it one at a time, and they're constantly leapfrogging each other. But it's worked for us, and at a fraction of the cost that we've seen in the industry. Yeah.
Do any of your platforms do offline viewing? And if so, do you have to use some different analytics for that?
We don't. It's all streamed. Okay. I want you, I guess this session is officially over. Thank you for your time. And if you want to stay, I have got a treat for you. Last year at Streaming Media, I was sitting here listening to different presentations, and so we had this sketch comedy show called Studio C. Think of it like Saturday Night Live for your whole family. And we had this video that was starting to go viral that very day when I was at Streaming Media. So in honor of that, I brought it to show you. This video, this little clip, it's about 4 minutes, received about 150 million views worldwide. And that had never happened to us before. And Studio C is more like a YouTube property. We get a lot of views on YouTube and social media sites, as well as our own digital platform. So with that, how about a little entertainment? You up the volume.
Coverage of the game of the year between Yale and North Carolina.
If you're just joining us, we have witnessed an unbelievably well-fought match tonight, and it's come down to penalty kicks. Peterson for Yale, taking the first approach.
Oh, there it is! Spectacular! North Carolina's goalkeeper Richards just left one in past him now. So now the burden rests on Yale's Scott Sterling.
Here he comes, nerves of steel, that man, dealing with more pressure now than a submarine.
Indeed.
Home crowd showing some appreciation.
Johnson places the ball on the spot, getting ready. That man literally has a cannon for a leg.
Yes, he does.
Here he goes, winding up for the shot, and oh! The cannon has fired and hit Sterling directly to the face.
We clocked that at a stunning 116 kilometers per hour.
Now that's a lot of miles per hour.
Little chance that man's nose is not broken right now.
Oh, indeed. Now, Sterling getting checked out for that one. Spectacular save, though, but sadly, he's not out of the woods yet.
On his feet now, a bit shaken.
But not stirred.
This crowd absolutely loves this man.
And Sterling's teammates welcome him back a hero for now.
Yale's up again for the second attempt, looking to make it 2-0.
He approaches the ball with some determination. Here he goes.
Oh,
Oh!
it's high and wide, way off target.
Yes, apparently he thought he was kicking a field goal.
Wrong kind of football, I'd say.
Good show.
Back now to Scott Sterling. He looks a bit worse for wear, but ready for round 2.
And Shaw takes a moment. Here he goes with the approach.
Oh! Sterling with a fantastic dive. The ball flies straight through his hands and once again strikes him straight in the schnoz.
And let's see it again on the old instant replay. Oh, every excruciating detail captured in HD perfection.
Clocked at 129 kilometers per hour. Sterling does not look well.
2 wonderful saves and 2 definite concussions.
They may replace him at this point. He's done all he can.
Yes, as his trainer takes him off the field like a mustached lion dragging a gazelle through the Serengeti.
Adieu, Scott Sterling.
Adieu.
Yale now with their third PK. Richards is in the goal, bouncing like an infant girl.
The crowd holds their breath as he goes in. Here it comes. Oh, very anticlimactic.
Let's see who they got to replace Scott
Sterling is back!
He's still in the game!
Oh my! And he's taking a very odd tactic now.
Seems to be curling up to protect his face.
Not exactly a recommended technique, but here it goes. Wait, no, Lambert needs to tie his shoe. Ho-ho, and that's why you do a double knot, kids.
Sterling still waiting for the kick to happen. He's probably wondering when. Oh! Sweet buttered crumpet!
My
The ball drills Sterling right in the face.
That man's nose must be absolutely devastated. He's gonna look like a witch that flew her broom into her nose and then crashed into a hammer.
I hardly even care about this attempt. Let's go back to Scott Sterling!
The man!
The myth! The legend!
3 perfect blocks by Sterling and his cat-like face reflexes.
Absolutely incredible. Though I must say, Sterling does not look well at all.
Well, you know football players like to add a bit of drama, don't they?
They're gonna take him out. No, wait! They brought him a chair!
Oh, a bold move by the manager. Bain sets up for the 4th attempt.
And this, frankly, is a gimme. He literally just has to kick it anywhere except where Sterling is sitting.
There is no possible way that North Carolina can mess up this shot. Oh! 158 kilometers per hour!
This man can do no wrong!
Look at him beg for mercy when it's mercy that should be begging for him!
He has looked death in the eye and said, "Take your best shot!" To which Death replies by punching him in the face over and over and over again.
If Yale makes this final shot, it's all over. But no! Oh, he misses, which means we're going to Scott Sterling!
His face is like a brick wall!
A brick wall that can feel pain and cries a lot.
But where's Sterling? Oh, he seems to be crawling away from the goal. What is he doing?
He's throwing away the match. Oh! Sterling has done the impossible!
I can't believe it! Look at that! He made it just right! What incredible instincts to crawl away from the goal like that!
And his teammates rush the field, happy as a lark as they slide in.
A Bernini sculpture of a finish.
As his teammates carry him off on the stretcher of glory, we thank you for sharing this absolutely heart-stopping finish.
Scott Sterling and his face of steel have won it all.
All right, thanks.